Greetings and welcome to another episode of Super Speak Sundays. I'm your host, James the Orator. You know, this is the lane where we have identified ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things. And today, we want to welcome you to Super Speak Sundays. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. The temperature's starting to warm up here in Indiana. And we are definitely happy to see the sunshine and the flowers starting to bloom. And it's also coming to the end of the year where I don't have to send Tuskegee University all my money. I've been paying this tuition. And shout out to my son, James W. Dix IV, the newest member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, Root. But yeah. So good to see everybody. Hey, you know, I don't know if you've noticed in our studio, we've made a few changes. You can see that our lighting is a lot better. I got me a couple of new ring lights, so that helps with the presentation of what we're doing. In addition, you know, we have just continued to identify great people to be on our show. You know, as time moves on and the weather gets better, you know, sometimes there is situations where our relationships may strengthen, and sometimes, go so well. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about relationships and what happens in relationships. We have someone who's an expert. They've been involved with relationship building and addressing issues in relationships. And so without further ado, we're going to introduce our guest today. Our guest today is Marta Bell. Marta holds a Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice from Indiana University, Bloomington, and a Master's in Criminal Justice and a Public Administration from Indiana Wesleyan University. Marta spent 29 years as a law enforcement officer for Indianapolis Public Police Department, retiring in 2012. Marta is professionally trained in domestic violence, intimate partner stalking, sexual assault, and human trafficking. As a survivor of domestic violence, Marta considers it a blessing to have had a career where she also regards it as a ministry and an opportunity to teach, educate, and change the minds of others who have been impacted by domestic violence. Marta has investigated over 5,000 cases of domestic violence and sexual abuse. The majority of those were violent cases against women. In 2017, Marta worked as a cold case investigator, and recently in 2019 was instrumental in the conviction of a cold case rape from 1998. As a consultant and sought-after empowerment speaker, Marta has touched many lives speaking for public and private groups, organizations, conferences, and utilizing her experience, education, so forth and so on, to do her thing as it relates to domestic violence. Marta has a book written called One Voice, Many Faces. Marta is an empowerment advocate and preventionist for violence against women, and also for men. I've seen her do some things for men as well. Without any delay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce our guest for Super Speak Sundays today, Miss Marta Bell.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So grateful and thankful to be on the show, Dr. Dix. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. We were excited to get you on because we know that, again, relationships can go well, and then sometimes things can kind of go sideways. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of our discussion today, we usually have what we call an impromptu quote that we show everyone, and we want to get your initial response based on what you see. Okay,
let's go.
So I'll show you that, and then we'll read it. So the quote says, "Strength doesn't come from what you can do; it comes from overcoming the things you once thought you couldn't." And that's from Ricky Rogers. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are this: a lot of times we don't know the strength we have until our strength is tested and we're put to the test, and we think, oh, wow, looking back, I never would have been able to do that. But I got through it, and it only made me stronger because I survived it.
Sure, sure. Now according to your bio, you've worked in domestic violence for a number of years, starting back with your career in law enforcement. But before we get into domestic violence, talk a little bit about how you decided to be a law enforcement officer.
Well, that's a funny story because I was at Indiana University, my undergraduate chapter where I graduated from in Bloomington, Indiana. And my ultimate goal was to become an attorney.
Okay.
Well, back then we wrote letters, and several people that I grew up with left IU, didn't finish graduating, and became police officers. And they would write me and say, you got to come be a police. We're blah, blah, blah is this. And they just talked it up so much. And I was like, I don't want to be the police. That's never been my goal. But during the time when I graduated, that was the time when a lot of the educational grants, unfortunately, were cut. So you didn't have the money to go forward to law school after I graduated. So I said, okay, they're making it so fun. So I came back from Bloomington to Indianapolis. I applied for the state, the county, the city. Got accepted to all three of them. But I was like, okay, the state, they can put you anywhere. And the state mostly patrols highways. And I was like, I might be assigned. I'll say Gary because that's where you from, Dr. Dix.
That's a beautiful place. That's a beautiful place.
They might put me in Gary, or they may put me way down in southern Indiana.
Right.
And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. And then with the county, they were like on the outskirts, basically patrolling the rural, not the inner city. And I'm more of a people person. And I was like, no, I want to be in the inner city where I can deal with the people and, where I grew up at and what some of the things I experienced as a young person, because I had a lot of police persons that were very instrumental in my growing up as a child and a teenager. And they always made a positive impact. And then I had friends that left the college and got on the police department. I'm like, I think I'm going to go with the city. So that's how I became a police officer. But it was not my intention to stay there. My goal was to use it as a stepping stone to go to law school. Save that money. Never happened. Life happened. And 29 years later, I stuck there and loved it.
Well, I tell you what, you have, based on the years that you have contributed to Indianapolis Police Department, you have really you're a staple in this community. Many people know who you are. Many people know the great work that you have done. Now, I want to kind of get into, domestic violence. I know that you were working in domestic violence, within the school, not the school system, but the police department. And you also experienced domestic violence personally. Now, did you experience your own bout with domestic violence first and then start working on the police department in those capacities? Or was it vice versa? Did you start working in domestic violence first and then you experienced domestic violence personally?
Well, I came on the police department, and I'm aging myself, but I don't mind because I'm grateful to be where I'm at my age. Right. But I came on the police department July 29th of 1983. And at that time, the police department did not have a domestic violence unit. But that was the majority of the runs that officers were taking on the street. And I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. I mean, we have an animal control unit, an auto theft unit, a robbery unit, all these units, but these are not the majority of the runs. So I'm like, shoot, if I see something that needs to be done, I'm like, let me write a little proposal to the chief back then. And he was like, no, I don't think we need a domestic violence unit. The officers are handling that pretty well on the streets. I'm like, oh, okay. So that was in 83. I did not experience my domestic. I just felt we needed one because compared to all the other specialized units that weren't getting the majority of the runs on the streets that IMPD, or back then it was IPD, Indianapolis Police Department, should have had one, but we didn't. So go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So that was in 1983. In 1986, well, basically 86 to 87 is when I experienced my domestic violence personally, as still being on the police department. So then
So,
I went.
so before you get into that, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the experience as a police officer in which you witnessed working with the community. So as you were going on these runs with within the police department, what were some of the trends that you were seeing with these relationships and domestic as it relates to domestic violence?
Well, a lot of the trends I was seeing was that it's everywhere. It's younger people, more seasoned, older people, married couples, people living together that are not married, people that have children together. So it was an array, and it was all over the city. It wasn't just in a isolated area. So
Sure.
that was the major thing I was seeing. It's like, wow, it's a lot of people experiencing domestic violence for a lot of different reasons.
Right. So some people may not understand constitutes domestic violence. Of course, if we've seen our mother or our grandmother, and maybe some of these things have been normalized because that's what happens in their family. But oftentimes people may not understand what they're experiencing when it is actually domestic violence.
Right. So years ago, domestic violence was not a crime. And I'm sure people have heard the statement, what goes on in the home stays in the home. And that was basically the premise from which people live their lives. But domestic violence became a crime. And a lot of it was because of the Women's Act. And when it became a crime and officers had to start doing what the law said, and the law said if a person hits, touches, abuses, then you have to do something about it. Back then, before it was a crime, officers would just make one person leave or separate them and tell them, if I come back, you're going to jail. Just use that as a verbal warning. But then it became prevalent that something needed to be done, because we know that people started losing their lives because of domestic violence.
That's right. And not only that, when there's a domestic in a home, if there are children present, oftentimes those children, it's very likely that these children can be removed and placed in foster homes or with relative care. A little bit about how it impacts children. We've seen the impact and so many times.
Exactly. Well, here's what a lot of times the adults will say: well, the children were upstairs asleep, or the children were outside playing, or the children were in another room and the door was shut. And I always say, you know what? Children are like little sponges. Domestic abuse or domestic violence is a learned behavior. And even if the children are in the earshot or can see it, it affects them, it impacts them. And a lot of the ways it impacts them is, one, I always say children learn what they live. And that's kind of a little saying that we've all heard. Children learn what they live. And when a child sees domestic violence, they think that it's normal and that's the way to resolve conflict. And it isn't. And one of the things I say is children who observe a lot of violence, this is how they start acting out at school.
Right.
And I always say the word intimidation is applied usually to adults. And I say a child bully is usually someone that has seen some type of violence in their home or in their environment for which they live and play in.
Absolutely. I know we just had a big situation with Will Smith and Chris Rock. And Will Smith, in his book, he talks about witnessing his mom being abused in the home. And so we, again, normalizing this type of behavior is sometimes the norm for, many people. Let's transition. So you start this unit at the police department because you're concerned about the number of calls that you're seeing that are related to domestic violence. And lo and behold, you end up having the same experience. Talk about your personal experience. Oftentimes people don't understand that the healing starts, when we're able to talk about our own issues that we've experienced. So kind of walk us through what happened with you.
Exactly. Like I said, I came on the police department in 1983. My domestic violence situation personally happened in 1987. So that was 4 years later. And we still did not have a domestic violence unit on Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department until the year of 2000.
Wow. So time had gone by. Probably some lives have been lost as a result of that time gap.
Absolutely, because legally, when people don't feel like there's any ramifications or consequences of their actions, they just keep repeating them. Now, personally, for me, I was one of those people. I tell people you do not have to be a product of your environment, because people say, oh, they're from a single parent home. I grew up in a single parent home. People say they grew up in the projects. I grew up in what people term the projects or low income housing. And I always say, you know what? The project is a state of mind.
That's it.
The project is a state of mind. And just because you witness stuff or you see stuff, or that's the environment for which you grow up in, when you get older, when you know better, you should do better and you can make wiser choices. So my personal journey in domestic violence, and keep in mind, I always say nobody wakes up one day and say, hey, I want to be abused.
Right.
And nobody wakes up one day and say, hey, I want to abuse somebody. The most important thing is, one, abuse is a learned behavior. And two, abuse is about two things, and that's power and control.
Right.
And so back then, I wasn't the saved woman that I am now. And I grew up, I'm the youngest of five. I had a little slick tongue. I had a sister that was a fighter. So she was like, anybody do something to you, we gonna get them. And I'm like, I didn't like to fight when I was growing up.
Right.
But, at home, you cursed me back then, I'm cursing you back. We all good.
Right.
You got a slick tongue, I got a slick tongue. You say something smart to me, I'm going to say something smart back. Well, like I said, back then, you didn't think anything about it. But now, looking back, the name calling, the put downs, the isolation, the demeaning behaviors are some warning signs that this person could be abusive.
Right.
And so, like I said, we'd argue. I'm good. After the argument, and sometimes, like I said, it's about power and control. So when you get tired of a situation that you're not happy in, you're like, I'm out of here. So you start letting the person know, I don't want to be a part of this relationship anymore.
Wow.
And then that person, especially if they have an abusive nature, they'll start feeling like, oh, wait a minute, I'm about to lose power and control over this relationship.
Right.
I need to do something. So they'll start doing little intimidating things. And like I said, my abuse started in 86. And this is one of the biggest warning signs. It was at the time when I was pregnant.
Okay.
I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. Before, like I said, it was just the verbal. So I'm walking you through the escalation of it. Okay. It started verbal, nothing physical, because I'm like, okay, you curse me, I curse you, we good. Okay, so then I'm pregnant. So that's a way for somebody to really say, oh, there's my attachment right there. They're not going anywhere with my child. So the abuse became physical after I had my daughter. The verbal part, the mental part, which is very exhausting and sometimes worse than the physical part, is very exhausting, because all you do is think, how did I get myself here?
Right.
Like I said, I was educated, had a degree on the police department, had a great job, great support system, all of the things and some of the myths that people put out there that an abused person doesn't have a education,
Mhm.
doesn't have a good job, doesn't have a nice home, doesn't have any kind of support system.
Right.
I had all of that. But like I said, you never know when an abuser is going to strike or prey, PREY, upon you. Like I
Wow.
said, it started verbal, and that verbal is also the emotional. And you kind of like ignore it or push it aside. Don't do that,
Yeah.
because it escalated to the physical. And I did say, I decided I'm out of here. This is not the life I want to
Yeah.
live. But at the time, I had a 2-month-old daughter.
Right.
And of course, that child is not just your child, it's you all's child.
Mhm.
And so they're saying, you can't go anywhere with my daughter. And
Oh.
the person that I was with was also in the military.
Mhm.
So he would use the threat like, oh, I don't care about the police. I'm in the military, and the military's has more power than the police, and they can't do anything to me. So you have this struggle, this power struggle between two individuals with some authoritative jobs.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
that's how my abuse started. And it really wasn't physical to the point of the black eye and bruises. And I tell people, just don't let it get to that part. It
Mhm.
would be a shove, and I'd be like, whatever, not paying attention to the warning signs once
Right.
again. So when I decided I was going to leave, and I say this, if you're going to leave any type of domestic violence situation, please, please, please get some experienced professional help so that you can leave safely. Get with some advocate or someone that can do some safety planning with you,
Right.
that can show you how to prepare to leave and prepare to leave safely. So, I'm like, I'm a talker,
Mhm.
but when it's over, it's over. But I'm also a transparent, honest person. I'm like, look, this is not working.
Right.
I want out of this relationship. We need to sit down and discuss how we're going to be co-parent apart. So
Mhm.
that was my conversation. So I had to work a part-time job that night. So I go to bed. I'm going to sleep. I had my sister come and get my daughter. Like I said, my
Mhm.
daughter's a few months old then. And my partner wasn't home. We left. I go to sleep. I wake up and I'm like thinking I'm in a dream,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm looking down the barrel of my service revolver,
Your own.
my own.
Hmm.
My own gun that I carry as a police officer on the streets every day,
Mhm.
running back and forth from dispatch runs to other people's houses,
Wow. Wow.
solving their problems. And so I'm thinking, what the, you waking up like you
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
shock. And you
Right.
almost really think, is this a dream? But you see the reality of it.
Sure.
And so I'm trying to calm him, but I see this like deranged look in his
Yeah.
eyes.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you don't love me, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh no, why do you think that? You done gave my daughter away. I'm like, no, I didn't know what time you were going to be back. And I
Yeah.
have to work a
Yeah.
part-time job at 1:00 in the morning. I was working part-time doing
Okay.
Vice for the police department. So we would go bust after hours clubs at like 3:00
Right.
in the morning. So you had
Right.
to be there till like 1:30. And so I'm just trying to calm him down. Like, and then I look out of the corner of my eye and my uniforms are cut up,
Oh wow. Okay.
laying on the bed beside me. And I'm like, okay, this is really crazy. So he's at the point of no return.
So at that point, when you noticed that the revolver was in the possession of your ex-husband, you noticed that your uniforms were cut up. Did you think at this point this might be it?
I did.
Mhm.
I did, because how can a person that has a gun pointed at their face not think that? You don't
Right.
think, oh, I'm going to get out of this alive.
Mhm.
And in the back of my mind, I'm praying like, what do I say to him? How do I get him calm
Yeah.
down?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to just sit up And he's like, don't move. And I'm like, I just want to sit up so we could talk. And he's like, it's too late to talk. You should have talked. You should have talked to before you said you ready to be out of this relationship. And I'm like, but this isn't the first time I've said it.
Yeah.
You know, when, you know, I'm one of those people, when I'm done, I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm trying to convince him that the situation is not that way. I'm like, no, you know, I'm like, I don't really want it to be done. I just want some things to change and get better between us.
So at this point, had you, you know, were you saying these things to get out of the situation, or as an abused person, were you really thinking that maybe we can work it out?
I was absolutely not saying it so we could work it out. I'm absolutely like, I just want to get out of here alive so that I can be a mother to my daughter.
Right.
And so, like I said, my daughter's a few months old then. And he's like, no, ain't nothing to talk about. This is the end for both of us. So then I'm like, wait a minute.
For both of us?
Yeah, see, I had been on suicide homicide runs. I had been on domestics with weapons involved. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, what do I do? So in my mind, I'm thinking, praying, but trying to think rationally, like, okay, what's next? So I was like, can you just sit down so we can talk? He's like, because the police are tricksters. I'm like, okay, the police are tricksters. And he's like, and I've killed people in the military, so to kill one more wouldn't matter.
So by this point, you are really, you know, just preparing and saying, hey, this is probably going to be
this is probably going to be it. And so, you know, I am, you know, grateful that my daughter was in a safe place. And but then I was like, what about our child? He's like, I'm taking her. When I go, I said, you don't even know where she is.
Right.
And then it was like something clicked with him, like, oh, how am I going to get my child? And so as I went to sit up in the bed, I eased up a little. So I'm on the pillow, but I'm still not all the way sitting up. And he's like, tell me where she is now before I kill you. And I was like, you don't know where she is because she went with my other sister. Which one? So he knows all of my family. I mean, we've been together almost 3 years. He knows all of my family almost 4 years. And so I'm thinking, okay. And when I say the one, he was like, oh yeah, I don't like that B nowhere. And I'm like, okay, this is worse. And then I was like, well, if you want her, I'll call and make sure she'll let you get her. You know, I'm just trying to think of things to get him to put the gun down. And I kept saying, put the gun down. And he kept saying, no, this is my control over you because you're trained. So he was recognizing my police abilities.
Right.
And not gonna let that get in the way. So I was like, well, let me call her now. And, you know, back then we used regular phones.
Right.
So,
no cell phone.
Them cell phones was not right there on your nightstand or wherever you keep it close to you when you go to sleep. And he's like, give me the number. So he said, I can't remember that number. And I was like, well, nope, you just want me to put the gun down. So I was like, no, I don't. And he's like, yes, you do. And he put his hand on the trigger. And I saw him get ready to pull the trigger. So I did this. I pushed, and I have a scar here today in my hand. If you look real close, you can see I have a scar right here where the bullet grazed.
Wow.
And did not shoot me in my face. Because when a person puts their hand on the trigger, holding a gun is one thing.
Yeah.
And I tell people, don't draw a gun unless your intention is to use it. It is not to warn somebody. It is not to intimidate somebody. It is not to make somebody do what you want them to do. So I saw his hand on the trigger, and it was just by the grace of God. It fired. When it fired, it went straight up through here, and he dropped the gun and ran. I think he believed he shot me.
He shot you, right?
I mean, I think he believed he shot me in my face. He did shoot me, but it was in the hand.
Wow.
And so my neighbors, that's another thing. My neighbors knew. I told them, hey, something is wrong with this man. It was like
Hmm.
he had done a 360 on me. He was
Right.
not the person that I had
That,
met
that you
before.
married. Right.
And later on, and he was actually my daughter's father. We did live together. We weren't married, but later on, I found out that him and another officer's friend or husband, they were into drugs. They were doing cocaine, and
Oh,
these were two
wow.
professional men, you know.
Wow.
So don't let the outside fool you,
That's right.
because sometimes that's easily done. You know, you
Hmm.
looking at what you think is a made up package, going to work every day,
Right.
professional jobs, and you know, it's all a facade. Like I say, if a person is abusive, their true colors are going to eventually come out. So the neighbors heard the gunshot, and I already had got on my radio and
Right.
radioed for the police and told them, you know, I had been shot. And, you know, they were asking the normal questions. Who shot you? Is the person
Yeah.
still on the scene? And they were sending. And when I literally say there were probably 25 police officers at my house
Immediately. Wow.
immediately, and an ambulance.
Wow. Marta, that's a heartfelt story. That's and I know that our listeners, particularly those who have experienced or are experiencing domestic violence, will definitely take that story to heart. It's a story of perseverance. I mean, each part of the stories you told, you had to make a decision. Whether you thought the decision would help you at that time or not, you had to make a decision. And thank God, that you were able to go into the GI Jane mode, and
Don't go there.
and not get
You gonna
shot.
get slapped by Will.
That's right. That's right. Hey, as we close out, there's a young lady, and again, I know we have teenagers, because we know that this is very prevalent with young people, domestic violence. It doesn't just happen with adults, but it also happens in youth dating and things of that nature. But there's a young lady or a young man, because men also are impacted by domestic violence. There's a young man or young woman, or a married man or married woman who's listening to this broadcast right now. What words of wisdom would you give them, to get out of their situation, to improve their situation, get out of the situation? What words do you have for them?
I would tell them, when it starts verbal, it's gonna escalate to the physical, and leave and leave safely, and believe it. And oh, you mentioned in something about, and you kept hearing me mention my daughter. And that was the reason I was like, I will not allow my child to grow up in the verbal start part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's no. So don't, people say, oh, I'm going to stay till the children are 18. Do not stay thinking you're doing your children a favor. You're
Yeah.
not. You're
Yeah.
doing your children a disservice, because you're considering yourself as the victim. I don't call myself a victim. I call myself a
Mm-hmm.
survivor and a thriver. But you think
There you go.
you're doing it for your children, and it's hurting your children, because the children are also, you're the primary victim. The children are secondary victims,
Sure.
because
Sure.
of the, it's called trauma bonding. They're bonded in the trauma of your relationship.
Wow. Wow. That's heavy. Trauma bonding.
Trauma
Wow.
bonding, yes.
Wow. 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 I gotta write that one down. I haven't heard that one before.
I'll, I'll
Wow.
email it to you. It's a lot of good information on
Wow.
trauma bonding, because, and when you talk about trauma bonding, and I said earlier that people will PREY upon you, you
Mm-hmm.
may meet somebody and say you're having problems in with a family member on your job, and that person starts saying,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I know how you feel. I'm going through that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
They're relating to your trauma. Oh,
Right.
my income is not what I want it to be. Oh, mine either. Let's get together and live together and put our incomes together.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
relating to your trauma and creating that bond, knowing what their end result is. And you're not even looking at it like that. You're looking at it like, oh, they're so nice. They want to help me. They want to be with me. Don't
yeah.
believe the hype. I
Somebody's the
always say,
prey.
don't believe the hype.
Somebody's the prey, and somebody's the predator. Yeah.
Yeah,
Marta,
absolutely.
Marta,
Absolutely.
lastly, on our tickler here, we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Talk a little bit about that and how people can, reach out and what they'll experience if they do call these
Well,
or email these numbers.
okay, first of all, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, as soon as you go on there, you're in a safe space. That's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
They let you know you are in a safe place. It says, and they get experience with high call volumes, but they encourage you to email them. Their email is safe, secure, but I always say, technology is so easily to expose what you're going through. Sure. So if you think your abuser is tech savvy or knows your passwords, and trust you me, abusers know your passwords on your cell phone, on your computer, you're not safe. But that 1-800-799-7233, and the number is scrolling across the screen, 1-800-799-7233. Or if you can't remember the 7233, that refers to the word SAFE, SAFE. 1-800-799-SAFE. That is the National Domestic Violence Hotline, or www.thehotline.org. It lets you know that you are in a safe space. They have 24/7 advocates. That's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They never close. So that access is for you regardless. And it's national. So we're in Indiana. It's not particular to Indiana. No matter where you are, where you live, you can have support and immediate support.
Wow. Marta Bell, thank you so much. Thank you for being transparent. I mean, I know sometimes being transparent and telling our stories is, we kind of put ourselves on the line, but I know that you do this because you look to help other people. And that's who you've always been, as a helper, a giver. And so again, we thank you for visiting us today at Super Speak Sundays. And it's been a blessing to have you today. Thank you so much.
Right. And I do want to end with one thing. I did not talk about my abuse personally for 10 years. I talked about it professionally because I was assigned to the domestic violence unit, and they would send me out to speak about it. And for 10 years, from 87 to 10 years later, 97, I did not talk about it, but I was adamant on staying on the cheeks about we need a domestic violence unit. So we got it in the year 2000. We still have it. It's not going anywhere. And I was one of the detectives, the beginning detectives, until I retired in 2012. And I still work in it as, for Urban Family Initiative.
Yes.
For everybody in the community. I still have officers from IMPD that'll call me for information. I still do presentations on it because we have to keep it out in the public eye and give preventive measures so that we can quit losing lives to it.
That's right. Hey, you are an advocate. You are, a spokesperson. Again, continue to do the work you're doing. We really appreciate you coming and visiting with us today. Until next time, we might bring you back again just to kind of follow up, because this is an ongoing challenge that we all will have to face, and we all will have to address as we continue in the 21st century. Again, thanks for coming.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me. All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Mm-hmm. Wow. What a story. What a story. Someone able to open up and share what they've experienced as related to domestic violence. Relationships are difficult. People are difficult. Again, You have prey and you have predators. Always be aware of where you stand, particularly in your relationships. Again, National Domestic Violence Hotline, www.hotline.org or 1-800-799-7233. If you are experiencing domestic violence and you don't have a way to get out, here's a way to start the process. Nobody should be in relationships where they are feeling that they don't have power and that they're being controlled by someone else. It's a tough life to live, I'm sure. Until next time, you've been listening to Super Speak Sundays with your host, James the Orator. Until next time, we'll see you. Peace.